Welcome to another episode of Rupert and Pinchy. How you doing, Pinchy?
Good. I'm feeling
All
very
right.
fine.
Chipper?
That's what my
Wow.
mom said
Okay.
this morning. That I was
Chipper?
chipper. She was calling me Chip.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, thank you for joining us at Rupert and Pinchy today. We're going to talk actually about a pretty large subject and of great importance and of such importance that it's almost uh, you can feel a little bit incapable of really addressing it. But a wise man once told me that, or I should say, asked me, "How do you eat an elephant?" And I'm like, "What?" And he goes, "One bite at a time." So we're going to tackle this subject, and what we'd like to discuss today is globalization and ecumenism. And define each of those. And our discussion on globalism is to bring us awareness of what is going on in our world,
Well,
but also to give to show a reflection or comparison to ecumenism and
the true difference.
whether and the true difference, and whether they're potentially the same and potentially hazardous and bad for the life of the world. So, with that being said, uh, globalism, to briefly define it as in its simplest terms, is the seeking of world control by a few, the dissolving of sovereignty of nations, although nations might exist in name only, to where there is basically a one-party rule over the whole earth. Now that seems really like a nut job
It
conspiracy Austin Powers movie, right?
is a conspiracy, but that doesn't mean it's not true.
Yeah, right. Um, so and it's been the actually since the garden, and actually even before the garden, since Satan said to God, "Non serviam," I will not serve. That's when he wanted to set up his globalism network. And so it is a desire from the very beginning. And then our first parents, of course, they wanted to become their own gods and disobeyed God because they wanted to be like God, separate from God, make their own rules and rule things. So it's kind of a desire that the human race has had from the very beginning,
Well,
and it's kind of a dis. Go
oh,
ahead.
would you say that and we kind of talked about this before that at the garden when we decided that we wanted to be like God or become our own gods, would you say that kind of where the idea of globalization is or globalism is from so diverting our love and adoration to God to the devil instead. So would you say
Or
it's
to
like
ourselves, which is the same thing.
right?
Yep.
But basically, would you say that the devil uses it as a tactic to get praise for himself to some degree, or to get back against God?
Certainly, he's the father of lies, but he's self-deceived as well. But yeah, he wants to be God, treated like God, adored as God. Um, and I don't necessarily want to bring Satan into it right yet, as far as in our
Yeah, I know, but
people are going
when
like,
we're talking about the origin of globalism versus ecumenism, it's like to me, talking about what globalism is basically we're trying to get to that same um, Tower of Babel control, and what we end up doing is we don't actually get control; we become controlled, and
right.
that's basically what I would think globalism is basically doing. Is it's trying to reach utopia, which like we talked about last time we recorded this, is we're gonna have probably that's an entirely different discussion, right? But that's kind of how where the biggest dividing factor for me is
Mm-hmm.
between that.
Yeah. Well, so globalism then is a desire to rule the world by a select group of people and basically end the sovereignty of nations, though they exist in name only. And ultimately, it bears down that just the logical progression would be to destroy the sovereignty of the individual.
Yes.
And so this sounds like a huge conspiracy theory, but it's been like we said, it's been a driving force or desire by fallen man
Through
and
history.
by the fallen angelic world from the beginning. And there are books and books written by the elites and power brokers of our day. There are videos by them. There are recorded statements by them where they explicitly explain this is exactly what they want. And so this is not a conspiracy, it's right out in the open. And someone may say, well, um, it may be in the open and not a conspiracy, but it's not happening. Or it's way in the future, or it's too difficult to get world control. And I would just suggest that uh, globalism is not in the future, but it's here already. Um, it's here as far as in its functionality.
Yeah.
If you want to understand, it may not have its name yet. It may not have the designated leaders yet. It may not have a constitution that is agreed upon by all nations yet. But it is functioning on many levels right as we speak here. All we have to do is look at the pandemic or scamdemic, whichever view you want to take. They're kind of one and the same. Of the last 2 years, that actually displayed for all the world to see the functioning of a one world centralized government,
Yes.
a globalization. And all you have to do is ask yourself if the response to the pandemic, and it's possible that the globalists caused the pandemic, that's another issue, but in response to the pandemic, across the world, it was unified, it was consistent across the board. The leaders and the medical professionals were saying exactly the same thing from country to country. And then and so it's been going on since the beginning of end of 2019 and beginning of 2020.
Yeah. You
I
see
would
the
just,
curbing of our rights in the
if you're
name of an
right,
emergency.
right, but not even get into rights yet. Think of the results. What has the results been? Have they been positive? No, no. It's been absolute destruction and mayhem and confusion.
Yeah.
This is what globalism will bring on every level. So
Yes,
that was just
absolutely.
the yeah, that was just the pandemic. So if you think globalism is a good idea, now please bear in mind, globalism is sold as a very altruistic and noble endeavor. But it is the results of it are nothing of the sort. It is communistic and Marxist, and everywhere it's tried, it's failed. And they just want to try it at a larger scale. So if communist Marxism killed 100 million people over the last 100 years, or 150 years, let's say, and that's probably a low figure, but when they say we just haven't tried it big enough or in the correct way, so that kind of indicates.
It's
What do you
probably
mean? You
not a
want to
good
try to
idea.
kill? Yeah, you
You're
want to
probably
try to
gonna kill
kill
more
more
people.
people?
Yeah, that's not.
More people? Yeah, but it's sold as altruistic and very caring. Now globalism shouldn't be confused with the noble desire for nations, sovereign nations, to work together in peace.
Yes. Yep.
But the difference is the sovereign nations dictating their own terms and not other countries, and not some centralized force distant from the people that are being served.
Is that?
So
Would you say that the colonies are a good example of that?
I
The American
suppose,
colonies, to some degree.
yeah, yeah, they were far separated from King George or Britain.
Yeah.
The king, and so local rule is always the best, and that's one of the things that a democratic republic is
Yes.
supposed to be. But anyway, coming back to globalism, uh, they want to sell it as a good thing, and but it in every area, if you want to look at globalism and its result, the pandemic, what else are they interested in globalizing? Uh, they first want to define climate change as a scientific fact
Mm-hmm.
and as almost as a religious dogma, although it's not a scientific fact, but they are still pushing it as a religious dogma. The LGBTQ gender uh, um,
Ideology
perversity ideology, that is what globalism desires to push. The desire, the what would we call the
what?
culture of death? They want to
Yes.
push the culture of death, abortion, euthanasia, uh, a very utilitarian mindset where those who are perhaps incapacitated, not capable, old, frail, mentally or physically challenged, are not good for they serve no useful purpose and therefore can be eliminated. Uh, these are the things that globalism
Brings about
uh, brings about. And not only that, these are the things that they've listed as their
their
main
main
concern,
dogmas. Um,
their main
well,
dogmas. Go ahead.
what do all these have in common is it's a dismantling of reality. It's instead of accepting reality that men and women are different, that children are children even in the womb, and that it doesn't matter what color your skin is. We didn't talk about critical race theory, but we're focusing on unreality to dictate reality, and that's not possible. And so it's really just a distraction and a diversion from the truth. And so if we can deceive as many people, then we can get them on board and we can control them. It's basically what I see as a summary of what their idea of what globalism is. And that's why I think we're getting closer to actual globalism, is because we see a full-fledged attack on all reality. On all
Hmm.
reality. These problems have existed in very specific, remote portions of these ideas have plagued humanity throughout time, but I haven't seen, I mean, I'm not very old, but I haven't seen this much of a planned attack on everything, really.
Yeah, from even though you're 18, but you can view history and see what history shows. So, the inklings have always been there. There's always been the tyrant is not a new fellow,
Right, yeah.
or the tyrant is not a new mistress because it does not the tyrant mentality does not just simply dwell in the masculine form.
Right.
Uh, so, um, but yeah, like you said, it's a denial of reality, and so and it's functioning right now in so many arenas, and so it's important that, like our first episode about getting off
Squirrel
the squirrel
cage.
cage,
Yeah.
yeah,
Squirrel wheel cage.
get off uh, that cage that uses all our energy and effort with no direction other than in a circle.
Right.
We need to be aware of and awakened to the fact that globalism is a huge threat, and we need to fight it on every in the cultural sphere, in the political sphere, in the religious sphere. So, and globalism is here. Open up your eyes. They are broadcasting it live, and you can see it played out in your small town school and
Even
in
church.
your civic discourse and even churches. So,
That's why we need to make a differentiation between globalism and unity in the church, or ecumenism,
ecumenism, yeah, it's one of those words.
because we see some of it infiltrate, and we need to differentiate between the globalist ideology versus true unity in the church. because we need to be able to balance that sovereign individuality to some degree to be able to believe something and to be able to have conversations about why we believe it to some degree. Would you agree that we basically have two ideologies? We have the one of the world, which is destruction of reality, and then we have reality battling out discernment of
Okay.
truth.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and the reason we're tying the two ecumenism and globalism together is because some very well-known people on podcasts and quite educated and quite informed, um, excellent podcasters and excellent lecturers have proffered the opinion that ecumenism is the spiritual form of globalism. And that is, uh, I would say, their observation in making that statement. I would not disregard that as untrue as
Right.
far as what has transpired
Right. Absolutely.
in the ecumenical movement. And but that being said, is there something to the ecumenical movement that is good? Is there a certain part of ecumenism that is good?
Yes.
And so we seek to answer that, and we would like to give it an affirmative yes. There is a portion um, of the desire of ecumenism that is good, as long as it's carried out um, in a proper way or understood properly. If
Righteously and
ecum
lovingly.
Yeah, if ecumenism just simply means compromise in order to affect unity, that is not true ecumenism, and that is not true unity. If ecumenism means you must sacrifice your principles for the whole, that is not unity. That is not true
That is
ecumenism.
globalism.
That is yeah, that is spiritual globalism. And so,
Well, in effect,
and so,
it affects the. I think globalism is a spiritual movement. So it's like,
well, sure, it's an
yeah,
anti-Christ, anti-God movement.
yes.
And go ahead. Yeah,
Oh, I was just saying that. So to a degree, it is spiritual. Uh,
excellent observation.
Globalism, but basically, globalism is a spiritual globalism in the first place. That's all I was saying.
Yeah, yeah, that's an excellent observation. I think that's correct. So, so first of all, setting up what ecumenism is and how should we approach that, and to where and set it up to where it's valid. Uh, Ecumenism generally is a desire and an effort between Christian
Christian sex.
denominations, Christian sects, to come to an agreement on doctrine. Um, if that is the desire for people to come together and come to an agreement on doctrine without sacrificing principles, that is a good
Effort.
effort. If it is to come together and try to understand one another's doctrines, and simply accept everyone's doctrines as equal and valid, and you can have your truth and I can have my truth.
Right.
That is relativism. That's globalism.
That's basically the antithesis of what we want.
Right. And so, so it has been that certain ecumenical movements globally have not only included Christian sects, but have included
Other
all
religions.
types and forms of religions. And granted, we're to have discourse with other religions, but to bring them in the group as equals is a mistake and is relativistic.
Well,
And so, go ahead.
well, it's kind of like back to our first episode. It's before we have our house in order, how can we judge the world? And we don't have our house in order in the first place. We're not always going to agree, but we can't necessarily bring in those other discourses if we as Christians can't come together in a certain way. Some Christian sects, or so-called Christian sects, do not belong in that group, honestly, in my opinion. So it really depends on how inaccurate or accurate our stances are, or our principles. If our principles are completely contradictory, we cannot have that conversation necessarily.
Right. If somebody professes Christ, or a group professes Christ, obviously definitions matter.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Who was Christ? Was he just a spirit? Was he just a good teacher? Just a man? And so, in general, just for us, now whether or not a ecumenical movement can include those people that don't recognize Jesus as coming in the flesh, generally speaking, they probably can't, because there's just too much distance between
There's a
the
complete
two
divide.
philosophies. Yeah, there is a complete divide. But between those who profess Christ as coming in the flesh, the Word made flesh, God incarnate, both man and God, two natures, one person, peoples of that faith should be able to get together and discuss, and seek understanding
Of doctrine.
and discuss and argue doctrine. Now, but this is a big subject, and
Absolutely.
it's a subject that only our discussions across the world, all kinds of YouTubes and seminars, all these things,
Information.
man's efforts are not going to accomplish this because it's too big.
Yeah.
But man's efforts are still required of us. Our efforts are still required to pursue truth.
Well,
Period.
I would sum it up as God works through humans to
Human agency. Yep.
because we are fleshly to some degree, but we're also spiritual to some degree, and but He's the only one that brings that ultimate unity and understanding. But He uses His people to proclaim His words. Even the Bible's written by people.
Well, the scripture says that prepare the horse for battle, but God gives the victory.
Yes.
So bottom line, regardless that it's such a big, monumentous thing, Christianity unified, that idea is so big, and that we would almost want to throw up our hands and not try.
Right.
But the key is that we just do our small part. How is an elephant eaten? One bite at a time.
Mm-hmm.
We just do our part, and whatever comes, but that's not what we're going to be held responsible for. So, in John, in the Gospel of John, the later chapters where Jesus gives his prayer to the Father for unity for us,
Unified as
the
He
desire, yeah,
He and Jesus.
the desire for unity. The desire for unity is a God-given compulsion, and so every Christian across the board, is given by God a compulsion, a desire to be unified. Just like if you had a family and there was severe disharmony, family members of goodwill would naturally have a desire
to be unified.
To be unified. And so I would just like to read this out of the Catholic Church's Catechism about this, and it's paragraph 822. Concern for achieving unity involves the whole Church, faithful and clergy alike. But we must realize that this holy objective, the reconciliation of all Christians in the unity of the one and only Church of Christ, transcends human powers and gifts. That is why we place all our hope in the prayer of Christ for the Church. in the love of the Father for us, and in the power of the Holy Spirit. So, in other words, it is a huge thing that only God can bring about. But that being said, we have a natural inclination to want this. Not only we have I guess, a negative inclination, we want everyone to agree with us.
Mhm.
Those kind of altruistic desires for love of the truth, we have to always fight. Well, I'm just looking for people to agree with me,
Right.
and
Right. With that natural inclination for unity, we sometimes avert that unification, and we have a different idea of what that means in the end. And so that's why so many people are on board for globalism, is because they have a misunderstanding of what true unity is. It's not let's get along to get along. It's why don't we actually have debates and conversations and actually battle this out instead of just agree to disagree. I said agree to agree earlier, but agree to disagree. It's like
mhm.
it's pointless to have a conversation and just end with, well, we can just disagree and agree to disagree. It's like it's a little more than that. We need to be. I don't want you just to, what would it be, fold under my strong opinions.
Right,
I want to have an
right,
actual dialogue. And where do we start? We start with definitions.
right. So, so we know that we are actually submitting and suggesting that there is a godly compulsion for unity that all Christians should have, and they do have if they really think about it.
Yep.
They want people to get along, um, and uh, so that's the first step of recognizing that is a godly desire. That is a godly imperative. That is an imperative from the Holy Spirit that we unify. Now, uh, this will be on just on a side note. It may take just absolute pressure from the world for Christians to finally recognize who is the true enemy.
Yes.
Uh, you
That's a
know,
good point. Who are we unified
so
against?
right, or who are we unified to protect
Yes.
to protect from? Because even the world and the lost world, we're still trying to seek them to be reconciled to God. Um, you know, but you're right. Who are we unified against? What is the
What is the
is
objective?
it? Yeah, if I'm a Baptist church on a corner and there's a Lutheran church on the corner down the way, are they my enemy? You know, or vice versa? Is the Lutheran church looking at, well, the Baptists are my enemy? No, actually, it's the person that is pushing gender ideology on your children. It's the Yeah, it's a person
It's
that is
wickedness.
it's wickedness, and so it's not your fellow Christian who professes Christ. Now that being said, you have to recognize who the enemy is,
hmm
the enemy of the soul. Now that's like I say, a little bit of a side note, but it's something to keep in mind.
Yep.
For ecumenism to be real, everyone has to agree that engages in ecumenism, and some of them do just unknowingly. It's almost automatic that there is an objective truth.
Yes.
If there
Otherwise,
is
there's
not
no point.
otherwise there's no point. You can have your truth. I can have my truth.
That's what agree to disagree means behind it.
Right, and so you have to recognize that in fact, yes,
There is a battle. It's not just.
yeah, and so if people professing Christians of goodwill can recognize and assent to the fact that there is objective truth, and not only is there objective truth, there's discernible and knowable truth, and that we're not talking about flavors here. We're not talking that, well, chocolate is the true flavor of ice cream.
Yeah.
Well, no, that is a taste.
Yes.
But, it's like the saying that there's more than one way to skin a cat. Okay.
It's such a weird.
Uh, okay, that's a. I where did that
You can,
where did that saying come from?
yeah, that's my question.
So, but there's more than one way to skin a cat, and someone could say, okay, really, what they're talking about there is taste or preference, because what what false ecumenism or false globalism would say is they want to
Real
redefine what a
globalism.
cat is. No, they want to define what a cat is. Redefine. Well, a cat can be anything. Well, what do you mean a cat can be anything?
You can't.
You could be a cat. I could be a cat. Okay? So when we say there's more than one way to skin a cat, it's like that kind of doesn't, it kind of muddies the waters. It's like, first of all, we have to decide what a cat is, what skinning is, what's the proper way. Could I skin a
Exactly.
cat with a ham? Could I skin a cat with a hammer? Yeah, but it wouldn't be
It
pretty.
wouldn't be the
Okay?
best. Well, it wouldn't
No.
be pretty anyway.
Well,
It would be worse.
yeah. Yeah. Maybe we should say skin a squirrel instead, because squirrels are
Yeah, are
edible,
annoying. Yeah,
uh,
just kidding.
according to some people.
Yeah,
But so anyway, so we have to come to the point that there is objective truth. We have to agree that that is true.
well, that's
And if we don't,
well,
there's no reason to be there.
right, and that's a starting point of a conversation. Is we need to have basic understanding, or not basic understanding. Yeah, basic understanding of what we're even talking about. We have a common language. We start somewhere. Oh, there's a truth. That means that we should fight for the truth, right? Because the truth is important. And so it's like there are certain things that we need to agree on, like how do we debate? What are the rules? What are the definitions that we have? Who is Jesus? Well, all these things is we build a common understanding, and then we can deal with the controversies, right?
Right. And the fact that there's objective truth, it's not like we pass a test or we
Right.
achieve at reality when we say there's objective truth and this is the truth. We have to understand that just the fact of knowing the truth is not the goal. The purpose of knowing the truth is so that it's effective.
Yes.
For example,
The
if we all want to
application
get
of
along.
wisdom.
Yeah, the application of wisdom. So if you're hiking across a gorge and you have somebody along the way that in your group that is a really good hiker and knows the proper way to do it, and yet there's somebody else in the group that feels like they want to have a say in what to do, you would want to go with the right way of crossing a gorge based on the experience of an experienced mountain climber
Yes.
versus somebody that maybe worked in a flower shop, okay, and they have an opinion. It's again, there's a purpose for the truth. It's so that it brings life and protects and saves. And
Well, I say
if
that
we want to,
the truth
ahead.
is practical, honestly.
yeah, if we want to be the false ecumenists, then we'd say everybody has a say. We need to try it the flower shop person's idea first.
We need to try every way, and then we find the best
Yeah,
way.
we need to try every way. Yeah, yeah. It'd be like having 100 pills put before you, and one of them has poison, and someone's saying, "Well, those pills are required for me to eat in order to survive." Let's say, therefore, I have to eat all the pills. Well, no. Why don't we find out which one's poison?
Yes, and
know,
deal with that
You
first.
know, right. So, is there any way that we can find out which one's poison? So, not getting off the subject too much, but coming back to the fact there has to be an objective truth, and that we can see, and then, like you said earlier, definitions. We need to define
Terms.
what we mean by. Now, to be honest, there's a lot of Christians of all different denominations or sects. I'm saying sex, Sects, not sex. But there are people of different sects that are Christians. There's male and female. Anyway, but there's many different denominations, and some of the people, or many of the people in the pew, they just want to go to church. They don't care about all these disturbances.
Right.
And they just want to go to church and do their duty to God. That's justice. for his, to his glory,
Yeah.
and go home. They don't want to argue,
Right.
and we can understand that. That's why we can respect and understand that attitude. But the truth is that whenever you become a Christian, you become a soldier, like it or not. And so
You're in it.
you may not, yeah, you're in it. You may not be the person fighting or standing up there preaching or witnessing to people, but you do have a place and you do have a part, and it's very
You're
important.
part of the body.
And yeah, part of the body. But also, it highlights the fact that God, in His wisdom, has leaders for a purpose, doesn't He?
Yeah.
Because because a lot of us don't have time to mishmash through all the issues, and so He designated leaders. What wisdom! And so
That's why they
that's
have to
why,
be so careful.
yeah, that's why the Scripture warns, "Let not many of you become teachers." And Paul warns many times of the grave position that leaders are put into, because much is required of them. To whom has been given much, much is required, and so, and the purpose for them is to lead their flocks in the right way. And
Absolutely.
so, anyway, but we're of those people. We're of the group that these things definitely interest us,
They
and
matter.
we're,
Yes, they absolutely
yeah, they
matter.
matter to us, and they're things that we're very engaged and passionate about.
That's why we're
Not
talking
it,
about it. Yes.
that's and not because we want people to agree with us, but because we think that it matters to follow the truth.
Yes.
So, ecumenism, the proper way is to recognize, first of all, that is an impetus from God that we
Be unified.
strive for unity. That unity does not mean unity does not mean compromise on principle. Now, when there are two principles opposed, what do? We can't. That comes to the objective truth. There can't be your truth and my truth. There has to be a singular truth.
There is a
Whether
singular
we
truth.
like, yeah, there has to be, and there is. Uh, and we have to get to the point that, you know what, there is a singular truth, and I'm willing to follow the truth wherever it takes me, and that it can't be my truth. I can agree with it. That's the joy of agreeing with the truth, being in concert and harmony with what's true. But so we have to agree that there is
Objective truth. Yes.
an actual objective truth. And then in chapter 13 of Corinthians, Paul explains. Actually, if we look in chapter 12, the last sentence says, "And behold, I show you a better way." And what is he talking about? I will show you a better way. Well, if we consider what Paul talked about in chapters 10, 11, and 12, and actually in all Paul's writings, his one goal is that people would come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, but also that he had a church, and that there was a certain function and way it was set up, and so that's what he was discussing in 10, 11, and 12. And he was talking about the gifts of the Spirit, the fruits of the Spirit. He was talking about ministry gifts. But then after all that, he says, "But behold, I show you a still more
Even a better way.
perfect way." And this is the way to accomplish all those other things, and that's through love. And so we need to love one another, recognizing, first of all, we have to accept the fact that people have. We need to respect their right to believe they're right. Doesn't mean they're right, but we have to respect that. We can fight against it, we can argue against it, we can debate it, but we have to respect that they have that right, and that they should have a respect to share what their view is. Doesn't mean it's right, but we first have to respect that individual. Paul even says that we should count others as better than ourselves. You know, we should expect the best from one another. So anyway, we operate in love.
So what does that love look like?
Well, I can tell you, it's easier sometimes to tell you what something looks like by what it doesn't look like. Okay, so that's one of the things that's really cool about Aquinas was not comfortable describing or giving attributes to God. Um, he was more inclined to always say what God wasn't.
Right.
So most of his writings expose the fallacy of what people might consider God or godlike or godliness or God himself. But he did say one thing, that he said God is simple,
Right.
uh, which another subject. But
Mhm.
anyway, so it's sometimes good to describe what that might what true ecumenism is by showing what it's not. So here I speak to my fellow Catholics. Many times I've heard on podcasts. I haven't heard from the pulpit. I, haven't necessarily heard from the leaders. Um, what the so-called leaders. But I've heard from podcasters kind of mocking or saying, making fun of the Protestant P&Ws, and that's the praise and worship sessions. And when I hear that, it grieves my heart because it is such a judgmental and arrogant thing to say. Just for a moment, my dear Catholic friends, think about the fact that a group of people, by a choice, by making a willful and intellectual act of gathering together, are singing praise to God, worshiping God, and perhaps they're getting emotional. Now, some of the Catholics might think they're really maybe more concerned about emotionalism than okay, have that discussion. But again, what's wrong with being emotional? You know, you are mocking a group of people getting together to worship in one place and sing songs that they either have written themselves or someone to give honor to God. That seems so uncharitable and callous. And in fact, the only thing I can see in scripture that comes close to that is when David is dancing before the ark and kind of getting a little emotional and getting a little out there and dancing and singing and banging on a tambourine. Apparently, with not very much clothes on. I'm not positive about that. I'd have to be Jewish to know. He probably had a girdle of some type on. But anyway, his wife, Michael, is looking from the window and sees him down there. And the scripture says she despised him in her heart because he was making a fool of himself, or what she thought he was making a fool of himself before the Lord. And what was the result of Michael's um, uncharitable opinion? She was barren until the day she died. She gave no life. She had no children. And so, my dear Catholic friends, if you want to talk about that faith is a motion of the intellect, do that. But don't dismiss a group of people uh, that totally puts walls up. So, looking at the flip side, let's say that my Protestant friends say, "Wow, you worship Mary. You're an idolater." It's like, well, no, I don't worship Mary. Mary's a creature as well as myself, and so, well, yeah, you do. And if you're going to criticize someone's view, it would be an important rule to do some research on it.
Yeah, I
Go
can
ahead.
actually attest to that. I don't believe that you guys worship Mary or that the Catholics do that. What I do think is, I mean, I'm not educated on the subject as much, but there are some things I disagree with it, and maybe I'll change my mind in the future. But I don't disagree based on misunderstandings, at least that I know of so far. But we need to have an understanding that maybe we're wrong about what we consider to be, what would it? We need to understand what we're actually fighting.
Mm-hmm. Right. Or we shouldn't say anything about it.
Right. what we're discussing.
So right, so there's a danger. I've also heard from the pulpit people calling out a certain church and calling it um, a demonic
Church.
church. Um, there's another term he used, but anyway, demonic. And so, that's pretty strong language. And so the only thing I can find comparable to that in the scriptures is when Jesus casted out a devil out of somebody, and they accused him of casting that devil out
Power of
by the
Satan.
power of the devil. Yeah, and they basically said you're a you know you're a minion, a subject of Satan, and yet he's God incarnate, and so they were calling um, satanic that which was holy, and God cautioned him and said, "You're sinning against the Holy Spirit. That is a very grievous sin."
Well, we need to
And
be really careful of saying
mhm,
stuff like that. That's why teachers
right.
have a responsibility to be accurate in their teaching.
So if you ask that podcaster, uh, why are you saying that about worship W&P sessions of the Protestants, the worship and praise and mocking them? They're going to respond, and you tell them that seems very uncharitable. Their response is going to be, "No, that is real love, because I'm telling the truth." Right?
Yes,
They're
yes, they
saying,
would.
"I'm being truly charitable." It's like, no, if you were, and sometimes the truth is like that.
Right.
Sometimes there are, okay, but this is not one of them. Let's be honest. This is not one of them. Even if you have an issue with the W&P worship and praise times of the Protestants, because you feel like it gives into emotionalism, talk about that.
Right.
You know, and also recognize the good, the desired, the desire for a good. Okay, so that same person that from the pulpit calls a certain religion
Demon.
demonic, uh, even says in that sermon that he's just speaking love. I'm just speaking love. And so, uh, are you truly speaking love? Now, that being said, uh, if he really believes that, according to what we said, that you need to be able to stand on your principles, you need to be able to consider that your way is the right way. What's he doing wrong? Well, uh, I guess if he's right, he's right. But if you recognize that he's not, and you have certain reasons why he's not, if you run into people like that in your life, you're not going to be able to convince them. You're not going to be able to have a discussion. You're not going to be able to pursue any kind of unity at that point. And probably you have to walk apart from that person. Doesn't mean you cast that person aside. You still pray, you know. But if somebody is calling you Beelzebub, you're going to have a hard time having any kind of ecumenical dialogue,
Well,
right?
yeah, well, it kind of has trouble with the definition of what love is according to Paul. Um, why don't you read that since we didn't
Did you pull
before?
it up?
No.
You can read it.
Okay, I'll pull it up, but I don't have it right now.
I can get it faster. I can get it faster.
The reason why
I can get it
why
faster.
the reason why I just want to look at that is because we can talk about how they're not necessarily doing it in love. I want to see how they deal with the passage.
Right. Okay, so in chapter 13, if I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge and have all faith, so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Anyway, that's First Corinthians chapter 13. So what's funny is that person that says I'm just loving, they're really like the they're they're really like the closet pessimist.
Yes,
They're
yes.
saying
Oh,
they're
I'm
saying
just a
they're being
realist.
the yeah, I'm just a realist. You are a satanic church. Okay, so bottom line, you know what? Knock yourself off. You have to, if that's what you think, I guess you're going to have to be faithful to that. But that's what's beautiful about objective truth. So let's say somebody is saying that about me. It's that love chapter is not only saying those who are speaking, but
Right.
those who are listening also have to operate out of love
Yeah.
and be patient and kind and not return violence for violence or vitriol to vitriol. So somebody's telling me that, yeah, you belong to a demonic church or and you're demonically led. I I don't need to react. And if I feel that that person's really saying that because they think they're loving me, I can go, okay, they're trying to do me well. Well, why don't we talk about this?
Right.
And if they're willing to talk, you share your opinions and you share your basis for your position, because truth is objective
Yes.
and it's
There's a
knowable and
truth.
discernible. Otherwise, we may as well give up.
Yeah.
If so, but it's knowable and discernible, and so we could possibly have a discussion. And by me not reacting in kind, and so those are some things that you can do. Operate in love. But it's so important, and we're going to probably get into some of those things as far as uh,
Details.
certain avenues of beliefs that uh, we agree mostly,
Yeah.
but we may discuss things that are controversial and from one group to the next. And
Well, this one
how do
definitely
you
was.
yeah how do you walk in unity with someone
Yeah.
that's calls you Beelzebub?
Hmm.
Uh, or calls you emotional and just singing because of your emotion to the Lord. And I guess we'll just stop it there. True ecumenical um, movements, true ecumenism requires an agreement that there is one objective truth. All right. Well, thanks, Pinchy. I'll see
Thanks
you next
me.
time.
I'm
Yeah.
just I'm just here for the ride.
Thank you for being you. Thank you for being you.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm I'm actually pretty happy about how this turned out.
Well, please, I don't know if we're still recording,
We are.
but just as a reminder, um, if you like this video or dislike it, there's a thumbs up or thumbs down. Please give a rating as such. And if you have a comment, by all means, leave a comment. We'll read those. And if there's some good advice in there, we're definitely
We'll take it.
open to take it. Yeah. So, and thank you for listening. And if you'd like to subscribe, we would love it. You'd be notified of when we're going to have a video. Our goal of having a video is basically once a week, I think. It may
Yeah.
get greater.
That's
Uh,
the idea.
and generally released on Fridays. Our website is still under construction. Just keep that in mind. Our goal is to have it completed by November 1st
Yes.
or sooner. We'll let you know when it's complete. So, with that, do you have anything to add,
Nope. Just thanks.
Pinchy?
Thank you guys for watching.
All right. Appreciate you guys. All right. Have a good one.
Have a good one. Good one. Have a
See
good
ya.
one. See ya.